A penthouse suite at the Aurelian in New York costs over $25,000 a night. It's a price tag reserved for billionaires' royalty and those with secrets to keep. For tech millionaire Adrian Thorne, it was the perfect place to treat his mistress, Chloe Carter, to a weekend of forbidden luxury in Suite 1812. He believed he had planned every detail, covered every track. But he missed one crucial detail. He didn't know that his wife, Amelia Thorne, the woman whose inheritance helped build his empire, had booked the grand royal penthouse directly, silently, fatefully above them. The air in the Bentley Mulsanne was thick with the scent of expensive leather and Chloe Carter's Chanel No. 5. Outside, the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan blurred into a Monet of brake lights and neon. Inside, Adrian Thorne rested a hand on her knee, his thumb tracing idle, possessive circles on the fabric of her dress. He was a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, and for the last 6 months, what he wanted was Chloe. Nervous, Adrian asked his voice, a low, confident rumble that always seemed to calm her. Chloe turned from the window, her wide hazel eyes reflecting the city's ambition. A little. The Aurelian. Adrian, it's legendary. Are you sure about this? I'm sure about us, he corrected, leaning in to kiss her. It was a practiced, perfect kiss, the kind that erased doubt. Amelia thinks I'm at a tech summit in Zurich. Her father's old cronies are honoring him with some posthumous award. She'll be buried in family obligations all weekend. We're ghosts. Chloe wanted to believe him. At 26, she was a senior data analyst at his company, Thorne Innovations. She had been dazzled by his intellect, his power, and the focused attention he had shown her. He made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. He spoke of a future, a life beyond the sterile, passionless marriage he described with his wife Amelia, a marriage he'd claimed that was now nothing more than a business arrangement. The Bentley purred to a stop beneath the ornate green copper awning of the Aurelian Hotel. A doorman in a topcoat and white gloves materialized, opening Chloe's door as if she were royalty. The lobby was a breathtaking cathedral of commerce and comfort. A colossal crystal chandelier, rumored to have been salvaged from a Habsburg palace, dripped light onto floors of polished marble. The air hummed with the quiet, confident murmur of the truly wealthy. Adrian, ever the commander, handled everything. He didn't go to the main check-in desk. Instead, a discreetly dressed woman with a tablet met them by a marble column. Mr. Harrison, she greeted him using the alias he'd booked under. Welcome back to the Aurelian. The celestial suite is prepared for you. Room 1812. Your luggage will be brought up momentarily. She handed him a sleek black keycard without another word. No paperwork, no IDs, no fuss. The privacy of the Aurelian's guests was its most coveted luxury. As they ascended in the private wood-paneled elevator, Chloe felt a thrill mixed with a potent dose of guilt. She had seen photos of Amelia Thorne at company galas, a woman of intimidating elegance and poise, with cool blue eyes and a pedigree that stretched back to the Mayflower. She was the Thorne in Thorne Innovations, having provided the seed money from her family's vast shipping fortune that had launched Adrian's brilliant idea into a billion-dollar reality. What's she like? Chloe asked the question, escaping before she could stop it. Adrian's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Amelia, she's organized, efficient. She runs the household like she runs a board meeting. Everything has its place. Everything is scheduled. There's no room for spontaneity, for passion. He turned to face Chloe, cupping her face in his hands. With you, I feel alive. With her, I feel like I'm managing an asset." The elevator doors opened directly into the vestibule of their suite. It was less a room and more an apartment. A sprawling living area with floor-to-ceiling windows offered a jaw-dropping panorama of Central Park. A bottle of Dom Perignon was chilling in a silver bucket next to 2 flutes and a bouquet of Chloe's favorite flowers, white orchids, sat on a glass coffee table. "How did you know?" she whispered, touching one of the delicate petals. "I pay attention," Adrian said, his voice husky, as he wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I know everything about you, Chloe Carter." He began kissing her neck, and the last of her reservations melted away under the warmth of his touch and the sheer opulence surrounding them. She was living a fantasy. For the weekend, this gilded cage was hers. They made love with an urgency, fueled by the forbidden nature of their tryst. The city lights twinkling below them, like a carpet of scattered diamonds. Later, wrapped in plush hotel robes, they stood by the window, champagne in hand. To us, Adrian toasted, clinking his glass against hers. To a future where we don't have to hide. Chloe smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile. She looked out at the view, at the endless expanse of the city. She felt on top of the world, high above the noise, the judgment, the complications. She had no way of knowing that she wasn't on top of the world at all. She wasn't even at the top of the hotel. High above Suite 1812, in the grand royal penthouse that occupied the entire floor. Above them, another woman was unpacking. She too stood by a window looking down at the same park, holding not a glass of champagne, but a slim leather-bound file. Amelia Thorne was not in Zurich. She wasn't at a family function. She was here. And she was listening, not with her ears, but with a cold, calculated certainty that had been building for months. The faint, percussive thud of a bass line from a song playing in the suite below traveled almost imperceptibly through the floorboards, a confirmation that felt as final as a gavel strike. Her husband and his mistress had arrived, and her own plan was just beginning. Amelia Thorne did not believe in coincidence. Coincidence was a luxury for the unprepared, a narrative for the naive. Her world, the one she had meticulously curated alongside her husband, was built on strategy data and the unflinching acknowledgement of human fallibility, especially Adrian's. The suspicion had started not with a lipstick stain or a late night at the office, but with a discrepancy in a financial report. A sub-account for corporate travel and entertainment, usually predictable, had begun to show erratic, high-value expenditures. A $5,000 dinner at a restaurant Adrian despised. A charge for a suite at a boutique hotel in Soho on a night he was supposedly working late. They were small waves in a vast ocean of capital, but Amelia had built her family's fortune by charting the tides. She didn't confront him. A confrontation would only yield prettier lies, more elaborate deceptions. Adrian was a brilliant innovator, but a predictable liar. He would gaslight and deflect, making her feel paranoid and controlling. No, Amelia did not want an argument. She wanted irrefutable truth. So she had hired Marcus Thorne. He was not a gumshoe from a film noir. Thorne was a discreet, terrifyingly efficient corporate investigator who specialized in what he called asset protection and risk mitigation for high-net-worth individuals. He was a ghost with a camera and access to systems that made privacy a quaint, outdated notion. For 2 months, Marcus fed her a steady stream of information. Encrypted emails would arrive at 3 a.m., containing photos, locations, and timelines. The subject of his investigation: Chloe Carter. Amelia learned everything. She knew Chloe's coffee order, her student loan debt, the name of her cat. She saw photos of her, laughing with Adrian in a secluded corner of a wine bar, of them holding hands during a walk along the Hudson, of a kiss shared in the back of his Bentley. Each photo was a small, cold stone dropped into the pit of her stomach. There was pain, of course, a deep, seismic crack in the foundation of their 20-year marriage. But as the evidence mounted, the pain began to crystallize into something harder, colder, and far more useful resolve. The final piece had arrived 2 days ago, an itinerary, a booking at the Aurelian Hotel under the name James Harrison. Suite 1812, the Celestial Suite, for this coming weekend. The weekend he was supposed to be in Zurich. Amelia looked at the booking at the name of the suite. Celestial. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. Adrian reaching for the heavens with his little dalliance. It was then that her plan took shape. It wasn't enough to catch him. It wasn't enough to divorce him. A quiet, civilized divorce would allow him to paint her as the cold, frigid wife he couldn't connect with anymore. It would allow him to rewrite history and walk away with half of an empire her money had started. No, he had chosen to humiliate her in private. She would choose to dismantle him in public. She made a call, not to a lawyer, not yet. She called the Aurelian's general manager, a man whose daughter's tuition at NYU was funded by a Thorne family charitable grant. Mr. Dubois. "It's Amelia Thorne," she had said, her voice calm and level. "I need a favor. I require the Grand Royal Penthouse for the weekend. An impromptu decision." There was a brief, flustered pause on the other end. Mrs. Thorne, of course. But the Penthouse is typically booked months, if not years, in Adthorne. "I'm aware," Amelia said, letting the silence hang in the air. "I trust you can find a way to accommodate me. Consider it a personal request." It had taken less than an hour for him to call back. The Penthouse was hers. Now, standing in the palatial living room of the Grand Royal Penthouse, she felt a strange, chilling calm. The suite was magnificent, a showcase of quiet, old-world luxury that made the Celestial Suite below seem like a trendy, nouveau riche afterthought. Here the art on the walls was real, a small Degas sketch, a Miro lithograph. A grand piano stood in one corner. A private terrace offered a god's-eye view of the city. Her single suitcase sat on a luggage rack neatly unpacked by a hotel attendant. She had brought 3 things of importance. The first was the leather-bound file from Marcus Thorne, filled with every damning piece of evidence. The second was a custom-made listening device, a highly sensitive parabolic microphone that, when placed against the floor in just the right spot, could pick up vibrations and muffled conversations from the suite directly below. It was a gift from Marcus. "Just in case," he'd said. The third item was a copy of her prenuptial agreement. She didn't need to read it. She knew it by heart. She had helped her father's lawyers draft it 20 years ago. There was a standard infidelity clause, but there was also a lesser-known, far more potent one, a morals clause, tied directly to the reputation of Thorne Innovations. Any action by either partner that brought public scandal or financial disrepute upon the company was grounds for immediate punitive forfeiture of shares. Her father had insisted on it. A man's character is his collateral. Amelia, he had told her. Never forget that. She walked over to the center of the vast Persian rug, knelt, and placed the listening device against the floor. Switching it on, she put on the connected headphones. At first, there was only static. Then a faint beat emerged. Music. A pop song she didn't recognize. Then a clearer sound, the high, bright peal of a woman's laughter. Chloe's laughter. It was a sound full of joy and abandon. A single hot tear escaped her eye and traced a path down her cheek. She did not wipe it away. She let it fall. It was the last tear she would allow herself to shed for Adrian Thorne. The grief was real, but it was now a fuel. She took off the headphones. She didn't need to hear any more. They were here. They were happy. They were living in a fantasy world built on her money and his lies. Amelia stood up, her posture ramrod straight. She walked to the wet bar, ignoring the chilled champagne. She poured herself a small glass of Macallan 25 neat. She took a slow, deliberate sip, the fiery liquid a stark contrast to the ice in her veins. The architect was in place. She had the blueprints for Adrian's destruction. Now all she had to do was wait for the perfect moment to pull down the entire building. By Saturday morning, the fantasy had begun to show its seams. For Chloe, the initial euphoria had given way to a subtle gnawing unease. Adrian, who had been so attentive and present the night before, was now distant. His focus tethered to the glowing screen of his phone. He had been scrolling through it since he woke up, a small, worried furrow in his brow. "Everything okay?" Chloe asked, propping herself up on an elbow. She was wearing one of his soft cashmere sweaters, feeling small and hopeful in the cavernous bed. "Just a market fluctuation in Singapore." "Nothing to worry your pretty little head about?" he said, not looking up. The comment was meant to be reassuring, but it felt condescending. He had never spoken to her like that at the office, where he'd praised her analytical mind. Here in this new role as mistress, it seemed her intelligence was an accessory to be admired, not engaged with. They ordered room service for breakfast. As the waiter wheeled in the cart laden with silver cloches and fresh juices, Chloe noticed Adrian's eyes dart towards the door, a flicker of paranoia in his gaze. He signed the check as Mr. Harrison with a flourish, but his hand was not quite steady. "I was thinking," Chloe said, "trying to reclaim the romance, we could go for a walk in the park later. Or maybe visit the Met. You said you'd take me to see the Sargent portraits." "Too risky," Adrian said immediately, shaking his head as he sliced into a grapefruit. "Too many people. Someone might recognize me." "Recognize us," she corrected softly. "Yes, us," he amended, but the damage was done. He saw this as his risk, his problem. She was a complication to be managed, not a partner to be protected. The first real crack appeared around noon. Adrian's personal phone, the one he'd sworn was only for her, and his most trusted contacts, buzzed violently on the nightstand. The caller ID read, David Chen. "I have to take this," Adrian said, his tone clipped. He walked into the massive marble bathroom and closed the door, but the soundproofing in the suite was not as absolute as he thought. Chloe could hear the strained tenor of his voice. David Chen was Adrian's right-hand man at Thorne Innovations, the COO, a genius logistician who kept the company running while Adrian played the visionary. "David, now's not a good time." "No, I'm not in Zurich. It's complicated. Look, the European expansion can wait until Monday. What do you mean the board is getting restless? Who's been talking to them?" Chloe sat on the edge of the bed, the pretense of their romantic bubble shattering around her. This wasn't an escape for him. It was just a different, more luxurious office from which he was still managing his complicated life. A life that she was beginning to understand she was not truly a part of. She was a secret, a diversion, a weekend getaway. When Adrian emerged from the bathroom, his face was pale. The charm was gone, replaced by a raw, stressed out frustration. "Problems at work?" Chloe asked gently. "Nothing I can't handle," he snapped, then immediately softened his tone. "I'm sorry, darling. It's just a lot of pressure. This deal in Europe is make or break." He ran a hand through his hair. "Let's just stay in. We can watch movies, order whatever we want. Just you and me. The world can wait." But the world was already creeping in. He tried to feign relaxation, but he checked his phone every 5 minutes. He poured them more champagne, but his laughter was forced. Chloe felt a growing sense of claustrophobia. The magnificent suite now felt like a key, its floor-to-ceiling windows, showing her a world she couldn't be a part of with him. She found herself thinking about Amelia again. What was she really like? Adrian painted her as a cold, calculating woman, but she was also the co-founder of his empire. A woman like that didn't get where she was by being a passive bystander. The story Adrian had constructed about his marriage was starting to feel edited, a narrative crafted for a specific audience, her. The breaking point came in the late afternoon. They were in the living area, a classic film playing unheeded on the massive screen. Adrian's phone buzzed again. This time it was an email. He glanced at the screen, and all the color drained from his face. He stood up so abruptly, he nearly knocked over his champagne flute. "What is it?" Chloe asked, alarmed. He didn't answer. He stared at his phone, his eyes wide with a terror she had never seen before. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. He slowly turned his head and looked around the room at the windows at the door, as if expecting someone to burst through. "Adrian, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" He finally looked at her, but his eyes seemed to look straight through her. "We have to leave," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Leave? What are you talking about? What happened?" "Don't ask questions, Chloe. Just get dressed. Pack your things. Now." The command was harsh, panicked. The suave millionaire was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. All the romance, all the whispered promises of a future together, evaporated in the sterile, fear-laced air of the suite. The cracks in the facade had given way, revealing the rotten framework beneath. And as Chloe rushed to pack her bag, a single terrifying thought echoed in her mind. What in God's name had been in that email? Upstairs, Amelia Thorne lowered the parabolic microphone from her ear. She hadn't been able to make out the words, but she had heard the sudden shift in tone, Adrian's panicked voice, the sound of drawers opening and closing in a hurry. The email had been delivered. The first stone had been thrown, and from the sound of it, it had just shattered Adrian's perfect little world. The email that had eviscerated Adrian Thorne's composure was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. It had not come from a recognizable address, but from a randomly generated encrypted Proton mail account. There was no text in the body of the message. There was only a subject line and a single attached image. The subject line read, "A lovely view from the Aurelian." Don't you think the image was a high-resolution photograph? It showed Adrian and Chloe in the hotel lobby from the previous evening. They were standing near the marble column waiting for the concierge. Adrian's back was mostly to the camera, but Chloe was in perfect profile, gazing up at him with an expression of pure adoration. Adrian's hand was resting on the small of her back in a gesture that was unmistakably intimate. The photo was time-stamped. It had been taken less than 24 hours ago. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. The photo had been taken from an elevated angle from the mezzanine balcony that overlooked the lobby. It was a perspective that suggested the photographer wasn't just a random guest, but someone who had been watching them. waiting for them. Adrian's mind raced, cycling through a Rolodex of potential enemies. Was it a business rival trying to get leverage for the European deal? Had one of Amelia's family members, protective of the Thorn name, hired someone to follow him? Or was it simpler and more sordid, a professional blackmailer who had gotten lucky? His mind, a finely tuned instrument for calculating risk and strategy, was now flooded with a paralyzing static of paranoia. The one possibility he did not for a single second entertain was that the architect of his terror was sleeping peacefully in a four-poster bed directly above his head. Amelia was in Zurich, drowning in familial grief and duty. That was a fixed point in his universe. Her absence was the foundation upon which this entire weekend was built. "Adrian, talk to me," Chloe pleaded. Pulling on her coat, her voice was shaking. "Who sent that? What did it say?" "It's nothing." He lied, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He shoved his phone into his pocket, trying to regain control. "It's a bluff. A competitor trying to rattle me before the merger talks. It's business, Chloe. It has nothing to do with you." But his eyes betrayed him. He kept glancing at the suite's door, at the silent telephone on the desk. He felt exposed, watched. The luxurious suite had transformed into a fishbowl. "Business." Chloe shot back, her fear turning to anger. "You looked like you saw a ghost. You told me to pack to run. This doesn't feel like business, Adrian. This feels like we got caught." "We didn't get caught," he insisted, his voice rising. He grabbed her by the arms, his grip tighter than he intended. "Nobody knows we're here. This is a targeted corporate attack. They're using our situation as leverage. The best thing we can do is act normal. Stay calm." His attempt to sound commanding was completely undermined by the sheen of sweat on his forehead. He was telling her to stay calm while he was visibly imploding. He released her and began to pace the room like a caged tiger. "Harrison, they don't know my real name. They know the room number. How could they know the room number?" He stopped, his eyes widening. The staff. Someone on staff must have been paid off. He was spiraling, casting blame in every direction to avoid looking at the simple truth: his own recklessness had consequences. Chloe watched him, a cold dread washing over her. This was the man who had promised her a future, a life of passion and authenticity. This panicked, paranoid stranger was not that man. She was seeing the real Adrian Thorn for the first time, not the confident CEO or the charming lover, but a man terrified of losing control. "I want to go home," she said, her voice small but firm. "No." Adrian's response was sharp, almost brutal. "We can't leave. If someone is watching, leaving in a panic is the worst thing we can do. It confirms their leverage. We stay. We finish the weekend. We act as if nothing is wrong. We project strength. On Monday, my security team will sweep this hotel from top to bottom and find out who's behind this." He was talking about his life, his problems, his strategy. She was a piece on his chessboard, a pawn he was now moving to protect his king. Defeated and scared, Chloe sank onto the sofa. The dream was well and truly over. She was trapped in a luxury prison with a man who was unraveling before her very eyes. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the distant sound of a swoon on the street below and the frantic, silent whirring of Adrian Thorn's mind as he tried and failed to calculate his way out of a trap he didn't even understand. He was fighting a ghost, a digital phantom who had his name, his location, and his secret. He thought he was playing a game of corporate espionage. He had no idea he was a pawn in a war of marital revenge. Upstairs, Amelia placed a "Do Not Disturb" sign on her door. She ordered a light lunch from room service, a lobster salad, and a glass of Sancerre. She ate slowly, methodically, savoring every bite. She did not need a listening device to know what was happening below. She had written the script herself. Panic, accusations, lies. The slow, corrosive acid of fear eating away at their illicit fantasy. The first act of her play was over, and it had gone perfectly. Part 5. The Unraveling. The next 24 hours were a slow-motion descent into psychological hell. Adrian's attempt to project strength was a catastrophic failure. He was a prisoner in his own gilded getaway, and his paranoia poisoned every moment. He drew the heavy blackout curtains, plunging the suite into a perpetual gloomy twilight. He forbade Chloe from opening the door, insisting that all communication go through him. When room service arrived, he would peer through the peephole for a long minute before cautiously cracking the door open, his body blocking the view into the room. He made a series of frantic, whispered phone calls to his head of security, a gruff ex-Mossad agent named Avi, and to his lawyer. Chloe could only catch snippets of the conversations, a complete digital sweep. "I want to know who has access to the guest manifest." "No, I can't tell you why. Just find them, Avi." Yes, it's a level 10 priority. He was trying to treat a wound of the heart with the tools of corporate warfare. He was searching for hackers and spies, for moles and blackmailers. His mind, so brilliant at identifying market vulnerabilities, was completely blind to the emotional betrayal he himself had authored. For Chloe, the fear had begun to curdle into a cold, hard resentment. She was no longer a participant in a romance. She was collateral damage in Adrian's crisis. He barely spoke to her, and when he did, it was with the distracted air of a general issuing orders to a subordinate. On Saturday evening, he tried to salvage the situation with a grand gesture. He had the hotel set up a private extravagant dinner in the sweet lobster steak and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than her rent. But the atmosphere was funereal. Adrian just pushed the food around his plate, his eyes constantly darting towards his phone, which he had placed face down on the table like a dormant grenade. "I'm sorry this weekend has been complicated," he said, his attempt at an apology sounding more like a CEO's press release. "Is that what this is? Complicated?" Chloe asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "It feels more like a hostage situation." "Don't be dramatic, Chloe." "Dramatic?" Her voice cracked. "I'm trapped in a hotel room with a man who is having a nervous breakdown because of a single email. You won't tell me what's happening. You won't let me leave. You told me this weekend was about us, but the second things get difficult, us disappears. It's all about you, your company, your secrets. You don't understand the kind of pressure I'm under." He shot back, his voice rising. "Everything I've built is on the line. Everything we've built." "You mean a voice?" in Chloe's head corrected her, and the thought was so jarring it silenced her. Adrian always said, I built this company. The pressure I'm under. But that wasn't true. Amelia's inheritance, her family name, her social connections. They weren't just the seed. They were the soil the entire empire had grown in. This realization sparked a new rebellious impulse in Chloe. While Adrian was distracted by another hushed phone call in the bedroom, she opened her laptop. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed a name into the search bar: Amelia DeWitt Thorne. The results were not what she expected. She had imagined a society wife, a relic of old money content to chair charity luncheons. The woman on the screen was a powerhouse. There were articles from Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. The quiet architect of the Thorne Empire. Amelia Thorne's Midas touch in philanthropic investing. There were photos of her not at galas, but at construction sites for the schools her foundation had built on panels at the World Economic Forum, and shaking hands with global leaders. Her eyes in the photos were not cold, but fiercely intelligent, sharp and focused. She radiated a quiet, formidable competence that made Adrian's blustering charm seem flimsy and theatrical in comparison. Chloe scrolled deeper, a knot of ice forming in her stomach. She found articles about their marriage society pieces from years ago. They were described as a power couple, a perfect fusion of old money and new tech. She read about Amelia's background, her degree in art history and economics from Yale, her position on the board of Thorne Innovations. A position on the board. Adrian had told her Amelia had no interest in the business, that she found it vulgar. Another lie. Everything he had told her about his wife was a lie. He hadn't just edited the story, he had fabricated it from whole cloth. He had painted Amelia as a weak, detached woman to make himself seem like a trapped victim and to make Chloe feel like his savior. The truth was sickeningly clear. Amelia Thorne was not the cage. She was the co-architect of the castle. Chloe felt a wave of profound shame wash over her. She wasn't a romantic heroine rescuing a misunderstood genius. She was a cliché. The younger woman, the office subordinate, a temporary distraction for a powerful man having a midlife crisis. She had allowed herself to be blinded by luxury and flattery, ignoring the glaring red flags because the fantasy was so intoxicating. She closed the laptop, the soft click echoing in the silent suite. The man in the next room was not her partner. He was her boss, a liar and a cheat. And his wife was not a woman to be trifled with. A new kind of fear took root in Chloe's heart. It was no longer a fear of being caught. It was the fear of what a woman like Amelia Thorne would be capable of if or when she discovered the truth. Chloe suddenly felt an overwhelming urge to get as far away from Adrian Thorne and his web of lies as possible. She looked at the door, her gilded cage, and for the first time she began to formulate a plan of her own. She just needed a way out. On Sunday morning, the atmosphere in Suite 1812 was thick with unspoken truths. Adrian was exhausted, his paranoia having burned through his reserves of energy. He had finally succumbed to a restless sleep, his phone clutched in his hand like a talisman. Chloe, however, had been awake all night, her mind racing. The illusion was shattered. She saw Adrian for what he was, and she saw herself for the fool she had been. Her primary emotion was no longer fear, but a simmering, righteous anger. Anger at Adrian for his deception and at herself for her gullibility. She needed to get out. But Adrian's command not to leave had been absolute. A direct confrontation would be explosive and unpredictable. She needed an opportunity, a moment of distraction. It came in the form of a call from the hotel spa. "Good morning, Ms. Carter," a polite voice chirped. "This is a courtesy call to confirm your 10 a.m. appointment for the rejuvenation package at the Aurelian Spa." Chloe froze. She hadn't made any appointment. "I think you have the wrong person. The appointment was made for you, ma'am. A gift from Mr. Harrison. A gift. A transparent, pathetic attempt by Adrian to placate her after their fight the night before. He must have arranged it yesterday before the world came crashing down. An idea desperate and daring began to form in Chloe's mind. This was her chance. Yes, of course, Chloe said, her voice smooth and collected. Thank you for the reminder. I'll be down at 10. She dressed quietly, choosing a simple, elegant pantsuit. It felt like armor. When Adrian stirred, she was ready. I'm going down to the spa. She announced her tone, leaving no room for argument. You booked it for me. Remember. Adrian looked flustered, having clearly forgotten. Chloe. I don't think that's a good idea. I have been locked in this room for 36 hours. Adrian, she said, her voice like ice. I am going. If your blackmailer wants to take a photo of me in a bathrobe, let them. Frankly, I don't care anymore. This is your mess. I'm going to get a massage. Before he could protest further, she walked out, closing the door firmly behind her. The freedom of the hotel hallway was intoxicating. The Aurelian Spa was an oasis of tranquility, all muted lighting, trickling water, and the scent of eucalyptus. After changing into a robe, she was led to a quiet, private waiting lounge to await her therapist. The lounge was empty, save for one other woman, sitting in a high-backed armchair, calmly reading a book. The woman looked up as Chloe entered, her blue eyes clear and assessing. She was impossibly elegant, even in a simple white robe. Her posture was perfect, her silver blonde hair pulled back in a chic, effortless chignon. It was Amelia Thorne. Chloe's blood ran cold. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was impossible. A cosmic, terrifying coincidence. She wanted to turn and run, but her feet were rooted to the floor. Amelia closed her book, placing it on the table beside her. She gave Chloe a small, serene smile that did not reach her eyes. Chloe Carter, I presume. Please sit down. Don't be alarmed. This is not a chance encounter. Chloe's mind went blank. She sank into the armchair opposite Amelia, her body moving on autopilot. You're supposed to be in Zurich. Chloe stammered the words, sounding feeble and ridiculous. Adrian is a creature of habit. His lies are rarely creative. Amelia said, her voice calm and measured, utterly devoid of the hysteria Chloe might have expected. I've known about you for 2 months, 3 weeks and 4 days. I know you prefer oat milk in your lattes, and that you've been working on the Pegasus expansion algorithm for Adrian. An impressive piece of work, by the way. Chloe stared, speechless. This wasn't a confrontation. It felt like a corporate takeover. I imagine you're wondering why I'm here, Amelia continued, folding her hands in her lap. You probably think I'm here to scream, to cry, to throw a drink in your face. That would be a waste of good scotch and my time. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense. I am here to offer you a business proposition. A business proposition. You've had the last day and a half to see the real Adrian, haven't you? Not the charming CEO, but the paranoid, self-serving man-child who is currently hiding under the covers upstairs. He promised you a future, didn't he? Let me be clear. There is no future. He will never leave me. Not because he loves me, but because our finances are so intractably interwoven that separating them would be the financial equivalent of unscrambling an egg. Our prenup would leave him with his salary and a pittance. I would retain controlling interest in the company. He would be ruined. Every word was a hard fact, delivered with surgical precision. He has done this before. Chloe, Amelia added a flicker of something not pain but weariness in her eyes. You are simply the latest in a series of distractions. The difference is this time he got sloppy. This time he used company funds. Amelia slid a thin tablet across the table. On the screen was a spreadsheet. It detailed charges for jewelry, for weekends away, for rent on a small apartment in Tribeca, all funneled through the corporate T&E account Chloe had seen him use. It was embezzlement, plain and simple. "This is your out," Amelia said. "I am calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I will be exercising the morals clause in our agreement. I have enough to remove him, but your testimony would make it undeniable. It would turn a corporate maneuver into a public execution." Chloe was stunned. "My testimony? Why would I help you?" "Because your other option is to go down with him," Amelia stated plainly. "When this breaks, and it will break, the board will launch a full investigation. They will find the payments. They will find you. You'll be named in the lawsuit. You'll be fired, blacklisted in the tech industry. Adrian will throw you under the bus to save himself, claiming you extorted him. He will ruin you, Chloe. I, on the other hand, am prepared to be generous." She named a number. A severance package that would not just clear Chloe's student debt, but set her up for life. Sign a non-disclosure agreement and provide a sworn statement to my lawyer detailing Adrian's use of company resources to facilitate your affair. In return, you get this package a letter of recommendation for your work on Pegasus, and you disappear. You get to start over clean. He gets what he deserves. Chloe looked from the tablet to Amelia's unblinking eyes. She saw the trap she was in, laid bare. Adrian's trap of lies, and now Amelia's trap of logic. But Amelia's trap was also an escape hatch. She thought of Adrian's panic, his lies, his condescension. She thought of the formidable woman sitting before her, an architect of vengeance who wielded facts and figures like weapons. There was no contest. "What do you need me to do?" Chloe asked, her voice steady for the first time in days. A slow, satisfied smile finally touched Amelia Thorne's lips. It was the smile of a chess master who has just said, "Checkmate." "First," Amelia said, picking up her book, "you go back upstairs and you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Let him think he's still in control." Returning to Suite 1812 was the most difficult performance of Chloe's life. She had to feign a relaxed post-spa glow, masking the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. She was no longer Adrian's pawn. She was Amelia's knight. Feeling better, Adrian asked, relieved to see her return without incident. "Much," Chloe said, giving him a placid smile. "You were right. It was silly to be so worried." For the rest of the day, she played the part of the mollified mistress. She allowed him to believe his pathetic attempt at a spa day had worked. She watched movies with him, let him hold her hand, and listened to his renewed hollow promises about their future. Every word from his mouth was now transparently false, and it took all her willpower not to laugh in his face. He was a condemned man, enjoying his last meal, and he had no idea. That evening, Chloe received a text from an unknown number. 8:45 a.m. Tomorrow. Black car waiting on 58th Street. My lawyer's name is Arthur Jennings. He will have your statement ready to sign. Be ready. The next morning, Chloe dressed with meticulous care. As Adrian showered, she packed her small bag. When he emerged, wrapped in a towel, she was standing by the door. "I'm heading out early," she said, her voice breezy. "A friend of mine is in town, and I promised I'd meet her for breakfast before she flies out. It was a weak lie, but his mind was already on the battles he expected to fight at the office. "All right," he said, distracted. "I'll call you later this afternoon once I've sorted out this mess." He leaned in to kiss her, but she turned her head, so his lips landed on her cheek. "Have a good day at the office, Adrian," she said. The words were laced with an irony so profound it was almost painful. She walked out of Suite 1812 without looking back. She did not take the main elevator. Following Amelia's texted instructions, she took a service elevator down to the ground floor, bypassing the lobby entirely and emerging onto a side street. The black car was waiting exactly where promised. An hour later, Adrian Thorne walked into the main boardroom of Thorne Innovations on the 50th floor of their midtown skyscraper. He had been summoned by an urgent, non-negotiable email from Amelia's assistant. He assumed it was about the European deal David Chen had been panicking about. He was ready for a fight, armed with projections and market analysis. He was not prepared for what he saw. The entire board was present, their faces grim and unreadable. His partner, David Chen, sat at the far end of the table, refusing to meet his eye. And at the head of the table in his chair sat Amelia. She looked radiant, dressed in a sharp navy blue power suit. She was the picture of calm authority. "Adrian." "Thank you for joining us," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the silent room. "Please take a seat." The only empty chair was one usually reserved for junior executives halfway down the table. Humiliated, he sat. "We're not here to discuss the European expansion," Amelia began, her voice cutting through the tension. "We're here to discuss a serious breach of corporate governance and the flagrant misuse of company assets." On the massive screen at the front of the room, where Adrian expected to see a stock chart, an image appeared. It was the photo from the hotel lobby. Then another. And another. A slideshow of his entire affair with Chloe Carter, curated by Marcus Thorne. Whispers and shocked murmurs filled the room. Adrian shot to his feet. "What is the meaning of this? This is a private matter. It has no place. It became a corporate matter." "Adrian." Amelia interrupted, her voice like steel when you started funding it with corporate money. The slideshow changed to a spreadsheet. It was the same one Amelia had shown Chloe. Line by line, it detailed every expenditure. The jewelry, the secret apartment, the weekend at the Aurelian, every dollar tied to his affair, embezzled from their shareholders. David Chen finally spoke, his voice heavy with disappointment. "We've cross-referenced the expense reports with your corporate card, Adrian. It's all there. The board has been presented with irrefutable evidence." Adrian was speechless, his face ashen. He looked at Amelia, truly seeing her for the first time in years, not as his wife, but as his adversary, his executioner. She had planned this, every step. The Zurich story, the hotel, the board meeting. It was a perfectly executed corporate coup disguised as marital revenge. And finally, Amelia said, delivering the coup de grace, "We have a sworn statement from the employee involved." The boardroom door opened. Arthur Jennings, a lawyer with a shark's smile, walked in. And behind him was Chloe Carter. If Adrian had looked like he'd seen a ghost in the hotel, he now looked like a man whose soul had been ripped from his body. He stared at Chloe, his mouth agape. He saw no fear in her eyes, no regret. Only a cold, quiet resolve. She had not been his partner in crime. She had been the star witness for the prosecution. Chloe did not look at Adrian. She looked directly at the board members. Mr. Thorne pursued a relationship with me under false pretenses and used company resources to do so. She stated her voice clear and strong. I was led to believe his marriage was over and that his intentions were honorable. I have provided Mr. Jennings with all the evidence I have to that effect. It was over. Adrian sank back into his chair, a broken man. He was ruined. Publicly, professionally, personally. Utterly and completely dismantled by the two women he had so profoundly underestimated. The board voted unanimously. Adrian Thorne was removed as CEO and chairman of Thorne Innovations, effective immediately. A motion was passed to pursue legal action to reclaim the embezzled funds and press charges. Amelia Thorne was named interim CEO. In the aftermath, Adrian became a pariah. His name a cautionary tale, whispered in the boardrooms and country clubs where he was once revered. He faced a mountain of legal fees and public disgrace. Chloe Carter, as promised, disappeared. With the generous severance and a clean break, she moved to the West Coast, took a new name, and started a new life far from the toxic glamour of New York. She never looked back. Amelia thrived. Freed from the dead weight of her husband's deceit, she steered Thorne Innovations to even greater heights, her leadership lauded as visionary and decisive. She had not just reclaimed her company, she had reclaimed her life. She had been betrayed in the most personal way, but she had refused to be a victim. Instead, she became the architect of her own justice, proving that the most dangerous woman is not the one who cries, but the one who plans. In the end, Adrian Thorne's greatest mistake wasn't the affair itself, but his complete underestimation of the two women he wronged. He saw his wife Amelia as a relic of the past, and his mistress Chloe as a plaything for the future. He never realized that one was the keeper of his history, and the other would become the catalyst for his downfall. It's a chilling reminder that betrayal often breeds the most unexpected and powerful alliances. The penthouse wasn't just a room above his, it was a war room where a quiet, calculated revenge was being plotted. What do you think? Was Amelia's revenge justified, or did she go too far? Could Chloe have done anything differently? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story as compelling as we did, don't forget to hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a good story of justice, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more true-life dramas that show what really happens when secrets and lies fall apart. Thanks for listening. The pristine white sheets of the hospital bed were a cruel joke, a stark contrast to the messy, agonizing reality of her life tearing apart. One moment Isabella was pushing through the searing pain of premature labor, her heart screaming for her husband, Alejandro. The next he was there. But he wasn't alone. Standing beside him, radiating a cold, polished glamour, was the one woman Isabella had prayed was just a figment of her paranoid, pregnant imagination. And as her world crumbled, a single devastating question hung in the air, a question that would be answered by a DNA test, a test that would either validate her deepest love or confirm her darkest betrayal, changing everything forever. Isabella's life was by all external measures a modern-day fairy tale. She lived in a sprawling glass-walled mansion nestled in the most exclusive enclave of the city, a home that boasted panoramic views and an infinity pool that bled into the horizon. Her wardrobe was a curated collection of runway couture, her social calendar a whirlwind of philanthropic galas and exclusive art openings, And at the center of it all was Alejandro Morales, her husband. Alejandro was a titan of industry, a self-made millionaire who had built a tech empire from the ground up. He was devastatingly handsome, with eyes the color of dark honey, and a smile that could disarm world leaders and melt Isabella's heart in equal measure. They had met 5 years ago at a charity auction, a chance encounter that felt like kismet. He had pursued her with a single-minded intensity that left her breathless, showering her with affection, respect, and a love so profound it felt like the safest harbor in the world. Their marriage had been passionate, a true partnership. He valued her opinion on everything from business acquisitions to the thread count of their linens. She, in turn, was his confidant, his sanctuary from the cutthroat world he navigated. When she told him she was pregnant 9 months ago, he had wept with joy, lifting her into his arms and spinning her around in their sun-drenched living room, promising their child a life of boundless love and opportunity. For the first 6 months of her pregnancy, that promise held true. Alejandro was attentive doting. He'd rush home from the office for her doctor's appointments, massage her swollen feet for hours, and talk to her growing belly, telling his unborn child stories of the adventures they would have. Isabella had never felt more cherished, more certain of her happiness. But then a subtle shift occurred, a change in the atmosphere as imperceptible as a barometric drop before a storm. It started with the late nights. Closing a big deal, mi amor, he'd murmur, his voice weary over the phone. Then came the weekend trips, sudden and non-negotiable. Investor meetings in Singapore, he'd explain, his kiss a fleeting brush against her cheek as he left. The distance wasn't just physical. The easy intimacy they shared began to fray at the edges. He grew guarded with his phone, angling it away from her, when a text message lit up the screen. The shared laughter that once filled their cavernous home became a rare echo. Isabella, hormonal and increasingly anxious, tried to dismiss her fears. This was the pressure of his work, she told herself. He was building a legacy for their child. To doubt him felt like a betrayal in itself. Yet the gnawing unease persisted. She started noticing a new scent on his suits, a faint floral perfume that was decidedly not hers. She saw a credit card statement with a charge for a lavish dinner at a restaurant they had never been to together. When she gently questioned him, he became defensive, his voice taking on a hard edge she'd never heard before. "Are you questioning my loyalty?" Isabella. After everything he'd asked, his eyes flashing with a mix of anger and hurt that made her instantly retreat, apologizing for her insecurity. The name Sofia Reyes first entered her consciousness as a whisper on the society pages. A rising starlet, an actress with smoldering eyes and a reputation for being as ambitious as she was beautiful. Alejandro's company had recently signed a major endorsement deal with her. "She's the new face of our brand," he'd explained dismissively when Isabella saw a picture of them together at a press event, his arm firmly around Sophia's waist. They looked for all the world like a couple. Isabella spent the final weeks of her pregnancy in a state of quiet torment, her days a hollow performance of the happy, expectant mother. She decorated the nursery in shades of cream and soft blue. Her hands assembling a crib, she prayed her husband would one day stand beside, with love not duty. She smiled at the baby showers her friends threw, accepting gifts with a gratitude that felt like a lie. Every night she lay in their king-sized bed, the space beside her feeling more like a chasm, and prayed that the birth of their child would be the miracle that would bring her Alejandro back to her. She didn't know that the birth would indeed bring a revelation, But it would be far from the miracle she was hoping for. It would be the beginning of the end. The first pang of pain was sharp and sudden, a fierce clenching deep in her abdomen that stole her breath. Isabella gasped, her hand flying to her belly. It was 2 weeks before her due date. It was too soon. She tried to breathe through it, telling herself it was just another Braxton Hicks contraction, another false alarm. But then another came stronger this time, a relentless wave that brought her to her knees on the cold marble floor of the foyer. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the pain. This was real. This was happening. Her first instinct was to call Alejandro. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for her phone. His name at the top of her recent calls. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. The person you are trying to reach is unavailable. Please leave a message. Alejandro. It's me. She choked out, her voice a ragged whisper between contractions. The baby. It's coming. I'm going to the hospital. Please, please meet me there. I need you. She tried again. Voicemail. And again. Voicemail. The automated voice was a cold, indifferent sentinel guarding the man who had promised to move mountains for her. Despair warred with the urgency of the moment. With a surge of adrenaline, she called her driver, her voice miraculously steady as she gave him the address. The Clínica Universidad de Navarra in Madrid. The private hospital Alejandro had insisted upon, renowned for its state-of-the-art maternity ward and its discretion for high-profile clients. The drive through the city was a blur of traffic lights and horns, each sound amplifying the frantic rhythm of her heart. The contractions were coming faster now, a merciless tide pulling her under. The hospital staff was waiting, alerted by her call. They whisked her into a private birthing suite, a room that looked more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility with soft lighting and sweeping city views. But its opulence only made her feel more alone. Nurses with kind, professional faces hooked her up to monitors their soothing words, a distant buzz against the roar of her fear. Where was he? Hours bled into one another. Each contraction was a mountain she had to climb alone. She clutched the cool metal of the bed rail, her knuckles white, her body screaming for relief, her heart screaming for her husband. The nurses offered sympathetic glances. "Have we managed to reach your husband, Mrs. Morales?" one asked gently. Isabella could only shake her head, the shame and fear a toxic cocktail in her throat. And then, just as she felt she was losing her grip, the door to her suite swung open. For a heart-stopping second, relief flooded her. He was here. Alejandro stood in the doorway, his tailored suit slightly disheveled, his hair looking like he'd run his hands through it 100 times. But the relief curdled into ice-cold shock. He was not alone. Standing just behind him, her hand possessively resting on his arm, was Sophia Reyes. The actress was a vision of cruel perfection. She wore a figure-hugging crimson dress that seemed to mock the sterile white of the hospital. Her makeup was flawless, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders in a perfect wave. She surveyed the room with an air of bored amusement. Her eyes, when they finally landed on Isabella in the bed, held a glint of undisguised triumph. It was the look of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. The beeping of the fetal heart monitor seemed to grow louder, a frantic, rhythmic testament to the chaos that had just stormed into the room. Isabella stared at them, at Sophia's hand on her husband's arm, at the unapologetic way Alejandro stood there, bringing his mistress to the birth of his child. The pain of her contractions was nothing compared to the agony that ripped through her heart. The storm had not just arrived. It had made landfall directly in the center of her soul. The air in the birthing suite grew thick, heavy with unspoken betrayals and the sterile scent of antiseptic. For a long moment, the only sound was the frantic, steady beep of the monitor, tracking her baby's heartbeat, a stark counterpoint to Isabella's own, which felt as if it had shattered into a million silent pieces. Alejandro. Isabella's voice was a fragile thread of sound, barely audible over the hum of the machines. He finally moved, detaching himself from Sophia's grasp, as if suddenly remembering where he was. He took a hesitant step forward, his handsome face a mask of conflicting emotions, guilt, frustration, and a flicker of something she couldn't name. Isabella, I came as soon as I got your message. You brought her. Isabella's gaze flickered to Sophia, who was now examining her perfectly manicured nails with a deliberate, insulting nonchalance. Isabella, now is not the time Alejandro said, his voice low, urgent. He was trying to manage the situation, to control the narrative, just as he did in his boardrooms. But this wasn't a boardroom. This was the precipice of Isabella's world. Not the time. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in her throat, raw and painful. You bring your mistress Sophia Reyes, the woman whose perfume clings to your clothes, to the birth of our child, and you tell me it's not the time. Another contraction seized her, a vice of pure agony. She cried out, arching her back, the physical pain a welcome distraction from the emotional torment. A nurse rushed to her side, offering her a hand to squeeze. Isabella gripped it, her eyes never leaving Alejandro's. Sophia finally spoke, her voice as smooth and cold as polished marble. He was with me when you called, at a very important dinner. I simply insisted on coming along to offer my support. She smiled, a small, cruel curve of her lips. We wouldn't want you to be alone at a time like this. The audacity of it was breathtaking. My support. Isabella repeated, her voice shaking with rage. You have been trying to destroy my marriage for months. You are not welcome here. Get out. I'm afraid that's up to Alejandro, isn't it? Sophia's gaze shifted to him, a silent challenge. Tell her, darling. Alejandro looked trapped, a lion caught in a snare of his own making. Sophia, maybe you should wait outside, he said, his voice lacking any real conviction. No, Sophia said firmly, stepping forward. She was claiming her territory. I'm staying. Isabella needs to face reality. Our relationship isn't some sordid little affair. It's real, and frankly, after all the stress you've put him under with your condition, he needs me here. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. Her condition, her pregnancy, the most sacred journey of her life reduced to an inconvenience, a burden. How dare you? She whispered, the words filled with a venom she didn't know she possessed. This is my child. Our child. She looked pointedly at Alejandro, her eyes begging him to say something to defend her, to defend their family. And we need to be sure of that, don't we? Sophia added quietly, the words dropping into the tense silence, like stones into a still pond. Isabella's head snapped towards her. What did you just say? Alejandro finally seemed to find his voice a harsh, defensive tone. That's enough, Sophia. But the poison had been administered. The seed of doubt, expertly planted by a master manipulator, had found fertile ground in the fractured trust between husband and wife. Isabella stared at Alejandro, searching his face for denial, for outrage at Sophia's insinuation. Instead, she saw a flicker of uncertainty in his dark, honey eyes. That flicker was the final fatal blow. He was actually considering it. He was doubting her fidelity. He was doubting their child. A wave of nausea and despair washed over her, so powerful it eclipsed the physical pain. This was a nightmare from which she couldn't wake. Her husband, the man she loved more than life itself, stood before her, with his mistress on the verge of questioning the legitimacy of the baby she was currently fighting to bring into the world. The white walls of the luxurious suite began to close in the beeping of the monitor, sounding like a death knell for the life she once knew. In that moment, Isabella understood that she was not just in labor with her child. She was in the process of giving birth to a new horrifying reality. The battle of childbirth was primal and all-consuming. In the hours that followed the confrontation, the world outside of Isabella's body ceased to exist. The sharp words, the betrayal, the chilling presence of Sophia Reyes. It all faded into a distant roar, subsumed by the singular monumental task of bringing her son into the world. Alejandro remained a silent, brooding figure in the corner of the room, while Sophia, to Isabella's fury, had been permitted to wait in the private lounge adjoining the suite. Her presence was a toxic energy that seeped under the door. At 3:17 in the morning, after a final heroic push that tore a scream from Isabella's raw throat, her son was born. He was perfect. A mess of dark hair, a tiny, scrunched-up face, and a cry that was startlingly robust. When the nurse laid him on her chest, warm and slick against her skin, a wave of love so fierce, so absolute, washed over Isabella, cleansing her of everything else. This tiny, helpless being was hers. He was the one pure, untainted thing in her shattered world. She looked at his face, tracing the delicate line of his brow, his miniature nose. She saw Alejandro in him. It was unmistakable in the curve of his lips and the shape of his eyes, which were still sealed shut against the harsh, new light of the world. Tears of exhaustion, relief, and a profound, aching love streamed down her face. She named him Mateo. The door opened, and Alejandro approached the bed, his earlier defensiveness replaced by a look of stunned awe. He stared at the small bundle in Isabella's arms, his expression unreadable. For a fleeting moment, Isabella's heart dared to hope. Perhaps, seeing his son, his own flesh and blood, would shatter the spell Sophia had cast over him. He's beautiful, Isabella. Alejandro, whispered his voice thick with emotion. He reached out a hesitant hand, his fingers brushing against Mateo's soft cheek. But the moment was shattered almost as soon as it began. Sophia appeared in the doorway. Her arms crossed her expression, a careful blend of feigned warmth and clinical assessment. "Congratulations," she said, her voice dripping with insincere sweetness. "He is small." She walked closer, her gaze fixed on the baby. "It's remarkable, isn't it? How babies can look like anyone." She let the comment hang in the air before turning her perfectly painted smile on Alejandro. "Darling, now that the hard part is over, perhaps it's time to clear the air, for everyone's peace of mind." Alejandro flinched but didn't contradict her. The poison was still at work. Isabella clutched Mateo closer, a primal protective instinct flaring within her. "There is nothing to clear up," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Oh, I think there is," Sophia countered smoothly. "A man like Alejandro needs certainty. He's building an empire, a legacy." The question of succession of lineage. It's not a trivial matter. A simple test would resolve everything. It would be a gift, really, to all of us. Isabella looked at Alejandro, her eyes pleading with him. Don't do this, Alejandro. Don't do this to us. To him. He wouldn't meet her gaze. He looked from Matteo's innocent face to Sophia's calculating one, his own a canvas of torment. The pressure from Sophia, coupled with his own wounded pride and the seeds of doubt she had so expertly sown, was too much. He was a man accustomed to data, to facts, to mitigating risk, and in his compromised state, that's what this had become, a risk to be managed. It's just a formality, Isabella, he said, finally his voice devoid of emotion. To silence any questions. We'll use the best lab. My office uses a place for corporate matters, high-level stuff. Gene Corp Diagnostics. They're discreet and foolproof. The name meant nothing to Isabella, but the words foolproof and formality felt like daggers. He had already made the decision. He had chosen doubt over faith, accusation over love. A nurse, looking deeply uncomfortable, entered with the necessary kit. A simple buccal swab from the inside of Matteo's cheek and one from Alejandro. The procedure was quick, sterile, and clinical. As the nurse gently swabbed her newborn son's mouth, Isabella felt a profound and bitter coldness seep into her bones. Her son's welcome into the world was not a celebration of love, but an evidence-gathering exercise. His very identity was being questioned before he had even been alive for an hour, all because his father had brought a viper into their lives. The results, Alejandro informed her, would be expedited. They would have the truth in 24 hours. For Isabella, it felt like a death sentence. The next 24 hours were the longest of Isabella's life. She refused to let Matteo leave her sight, holding him. Feeding him, memorizing every detail of his perfect face, as if she were branding the image of him onto her soul. Alejandro had retreated, booking a separate room in the hospital at Sophia's insistence. He sent flowers, a massive, ostentatious bouquet of white lilies that filled the room with a funereal scent. Isabella had the nurses remove them immediately. She existed in a state of suspended animation, a bubble of maternal love, surrounded by a sea of dread. Every time the door opened, her heart leaped into her throat. Nurses came and went, checking on her, and the baby, their professional smiles doing little to soothe her frayed nerves. They all knew. The hospital staff whispered in the hallways. The story of the millionaire, his laboring wife, and the famous actress was the kind of drama that spread like wildfire. Isabella felt their pity, their judgment, and it was suffocating. Late the next afternoon, Alejandro appeared at her door. Alone this time. He looked haggard, his expensive suit rumpled. In his hand he held a sleek tablet. "The results are in," he said, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth. He didn't approach the bed, but stood near the door, as if creating a safe distance between them. Isabella's breath hitched. She tightened her hold on Matteo, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Alejandro, Gene Corp just sent the encrypted report to my secure server," he said, his fingers tapping on the screen. He brought up a document, a clinical-looking page filled with genetic markers and technical jargon. But at the bottom, highlighted in a stark red box, was the conclusion. He turned the tablet towards her. She didn't need to read the complex data. The 2 words at the bottom were all that mattered. Probability of paternity, 0%. The world tilted on its axis, the beeping of the monitors, the distant city sounds, her own breathing. It all faded into a deafening silence. 0%. The number was an absurdity, a statistical impossibility, a lie so profound it defied comprehension. "No," she whispered. It was the only word she could form. "No, that's not possible. It's a mistake." Alejandro let out a harsh, broken sound that was almost a laugh. A mistake Isabella Gene Corp Diagnostics has a perfect record. They are the best in the world. The science doesn't lie. He looked at her then, and the conflict that had been warring in his eyes was gone. It had been replaced by a chilling certainty, a look of utter betrayal and revulsion. All this time he said, his voice thick with a pain so deep it was terrifying. Our entire marriage. Was it all a lie? Who was he, Isabella? Who was the man you were sleeping with behind my back? There was no one, she cried, her voice cracking. Alejandro. You are his father. I have never been with anyone but you. Look at him. He looks just like you. I don't see it. He shot back his face, a cold, hard mask. I see a stranger. I see your betrayal. Suddenly the door swung open, and Sophia swept in, a dark angel arriving for the final act. She went straight to Alejandro's side, placing a comforting hand on his back. I'm so sorry, darling, she murmured, though her eyes when they met Isabella's were alight with malicious triumph. I knew something was wrong. I could feel your pain. She was the architect of this destruction, and now she was playing the part of the savior. There's been a mistake, Isabella, repeated her voice, rising with hysteria. The lab, someone made a mistake. Or you did this, she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Sophia. This is your doing. Sophia feigned a wounded look. Isabella, I know you're emotional, but this paranoia is not helping. You've been caught in a lie, and you're lashing out. It's understandable. She turned to Alejandro. She's not well, my love. We need to get you away from this toxicity. Alejandro looked at Isabella, at the woman he had once loved, now hysterical in a hospital bed, clutching a child he believed wasn't his. And he made his choice. My lawyers will be in contact with you, he said, his voice as cold and final as a tombstone. They will arrange for a settlement on the condition that you sign a non-disclosure agreement and disappear. You will not use my name. The child is not my responsibility. You are on your own. He turned and walked away. Sophia clinging to his arm, whispering soothingly to him. He didn't look back. The door clicked shut, plunging the room into a deafening silence. Isabella stared at the closed door, her mind struggling to process the cataclysmic event that had just occurred. She had lost everything. Her husband, her home, her name, her future. They had taken it all. She looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms, his tiny chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. He was all she had left. A new feeling began to smolder beneath the shock and grief. It was a slow burning ember of rage. They had called her a liar. They had called her son a stranger. They had built a lie on top of a betrayal and used it to destroy her. No, she whispered, not to the empty room, but to her son. I will not disappear. I will fight. I will prove who you are, Matteo. I swear it. The first deception had been fired. The war had just begun. The eviction was swift and brutal. Less than 48 hours after giving birth, while she was still physically and emotionally shattered, a stern-faced man in a tailored suit, one of Alejandro's lawyers, arrived at the hospital. He presented her with a set of papers and a bank card. "Mr. Morales has made an initial deposit of €50,000 into this account." The lawyer stated, his voice devoid of any sympathy. "It is a gesture of goodwill. In exchange, you will vacate the premises of the Madrid estate by the end of the day. A car will be waiting to take you and the child wherever you wish to go within the city limits." He slid another document across the table. "A non-disclosure agreement. Sign this and a more substantial final settlement will be discussed. Refuse and the goodwill deposit is all you will ever receive." Isabella looked at the man at the cold legal document that sought to erase her from Alejandro's life to buy her silence and her son's illegitimacy. The ember of rage within her glowed brighter. She pushed the papers back across the table. "Tell Alejandro Morales I will not be silenced," she said, her voice shaking but firm. The lawyer simply raised an eyebrow, collected his papers and left. The message was clear. She had chosen the hard way. Thrown out of the hospital with a newborn and a small bag of borrowed baby supplies. The reality of her situation hit her with the force of a physical blow. The gilded cage had vanished, and she was in a free fall. She had no family in Madrid. Her parents lived in a small town in a different country, and had a fragile relationship with Alejandro at best. Her so-called friends were Alejandro's friends, society swans who would flock to power and money, and would undoubtedly believe the salacious narrative Sofia and Alejandro were already spinning. There was only one person she could turn to: Ana. Ana was her childhood friend, a fiery, no-nonsense journalist who had always viewed Isabella's millionaire lifestyle with a healthy dose of skepticism. She lived in a small, cluttered but cozy apartment in the vibrant Malasaña district, a world away from the sterile opulence Isabella had known. When Isabella called, her voice breaking, Ana didn't hesitate. "Give me the address. I'm coming to get you." Seeing Ana's familiar, warm face was the first moment Isabella felt she could truly breathe. Ana took one look at her pale, shell-shocked friend and the tiny infant in her arms, and her expression hardened with protective fury. "That son of a bitch," Ana muttered carefully, taking Matteo from Isabella's arms so she could get in the car. "I never trusted him. Too polished. Too perfect." Ana's apartment was a sanctuary. It smelled of coffee, old books, and life. While Isabella showered, Ana made a makeshift nursery in her spare room. She listened patiently as Isabella recounted the entire horrific ordeal, the months of suspicion, the confrontation in the hospital, Sofia's cruel words, and the devastating DNA test. 0%, Ana said, her journalist's mind immediately kicking into gear. "That's not just a negative result, that's a statistical anomaly. It's almost more likely to get a false positive than a result that absolute. Unless it's true," Isabella whispered, the fear still a raw wound. "No," Ana said firmly, her eyes blazing with conviction. "Unless it was rigged. You said he used a place called Gene Corp Diagnostics." Isabella nodded. "I've heard of them," Ana said, pulling out her laptop. "They're top tier. They handle sensitive corporate espionage cases, high-stakes patent disputes. Their security is supposed to be legendary, which also means their reputation is everything. A proven mistake would ruin them." For days, Isabella focused solely on Matteo, finding a fragile peace in the simple, demanding rhythm of caring for a newborn. But Ana was a dog with a bone. She spent her nights digging using her journalistic resources and back channels to probe into Gene Corp. It's a fortress, Anna reported back a week later, frustrated. Their digital security is airtight. No disgruntled employees speaking out, no whispers of malpractice. They're clean. Isabella's heart sank. So it's a dead end. Not necessarily. Anna said, her eyes gleaming. If you can't break down the front door, you look for a side window. You said Alejandro's lawyer mentioned they use Gene Corp for corporate matters, right? High-level stuff. Isabella nodded. So who in Alejandro's corporate world would have the motive and the means to orchestrate something this complex? This isn't just about a jealous mistress wanting to get rid of a wife. Tampering with a Gene Corp result would be incredibly risky and expensive. Sophia might have the motive, but does she have that kind of power? This feels bigger. This feels like a corporate hit aimed directly at Alejandro's heart. Anna's words hung in the air. The idea was terrifying, but it also made a twisted kind of sense. The attack felt too precise, too devastating to be merely a crime of passion. They had targeted his legacy, his heir. We need proof, Anna. Without it, it's just a crazy conspiracy theory from a bitter, discarded wife. Then we get proof, Anna declared, her jaw set. We can't challenge Gene Corp head-on. But we can investigate the chain of custody. The sample was taken at the hospital. It was picked up by a courier. It was delivered to the lab. Every step is a link in the chain, and every chain has a weak link. We just need to find it. It was a sliver of hope, but for Isabella, it was everything. She was no longer just a victim. She was a fighter. Cast out and left with nothing, she and Anna would start their own investigation, a quiet war waged from a small apartment in Malasaña against a powerful, unseen enemy. They were looking for the truth, one broken link at a time. The first few weeks of the investigation were a series of frustrating dead ends. Anna's official inquiries into the hospital's protocol were met with polite but firm stonewalling, citing patient confidentiality. Alejandro's confidentiality. They refused to release the name of the courier service or the specific technician who handled the samples. It was a wall of institutional silence designed to protect wealthy clients. They're circling the wagons, Anna said, pacing her small living room, a mess of papers spread across her coffee table. Alejandro's legal team has probably already been in contact, reminding them of the consequences of a privacy breach. Isabella, rocking a fussy Matteo, felt a familiar wave of despair. So we're stuck. No. Anna insisted, her eyes alight with a new idea. We're thinking like journalists trying to get people to talk. We need to think like a spy. The weak link isn't the official channels, it's the people. Anna's new strategy was to focus on the human element. She spent days camped out in the cafe across from the Clínica Universidad de Navarra, observing the flow of medical couriers. She cross-referenced the logos on their uniforms with local company databases. After 3 days of surveillance and 10 cups of coffee, she got a hit, a mid-level company called Biotrans Express. They weren't the biggest or most prestigious, but they handled overflow work for several major hospitals. The next step was to find the driver. Anna, using a plausible cover story about a lost but sentimentally valuable and non-biological package, managed to get a list of drivers who had been on duty the night Matteo was born. One name stood out, Javier. A part-time driver, a university student trying to make extra cash. He was the definition of a weak link. Finding Javier was easy enough. Getting him to talk was harder. Anna and Isabella, with Matteo sleeping in his carrier, cornered him one afternoon on his university campus. He was jumpy, defensive, and denied everything. I just deliver the packages. He insisted, refusing to make eye contact. I don't know what's in them. I pick up. I drop off. That's it. But Anna was relentless. We know there was a special pickup that night. A priority run from the Clinica to Gene Corp Diagnostics. A VIP client. A pickup that was logged under unusual circumstances. She was bluffing, but it was a calculated risk. Javier's composure cracked. He paled. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Isabella spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but heavy with the weight of her pain. She adjusted the carrier so Javier could see Matteo's sleeping face. That package contained the future of this little boy. It was a lie. And we think you know something about it. The sight of the baby, the raw emotion in Isabella's voice, seemed to break through Javier's fear. He glanced around nervously, then motioned for them to follow him to a more secluded bench. Look, I needed the money, he confessed, his voice dropping to a whisper. My tuition was due. I got a call that night, not from my dispatcher, but from a private number. It was a man. He told me to intercept the VIP pickup from the Clinica. He said the original sample was contaminated, and that he had the replacement sample. He told me to make sure the replacement was the one that got delivered to Gene Corp. Isabella's heart hammered in her chest. A replacement sample. Did you see the man? Javier shook his head. No. He directed me to a side street near the hospital. The package was left for me in a lockbox. It looked official, same packaging, same seals. But the original sample, I was supposed to destroy it. He paid me 5,000 euros just to switch the packages and keep my mouth shut. It was the smoking gun, a confession, a clear act of sabotage. Did he give you a name? Anything? Anna pressed. No name, Javier said. But his voice, it was distinctive, low, gravelly, and he mentioned a name. He said, Rivas will be pleased the matter is handled. The name hung in the air. Rivas. It meant nothing to Isabella. But when she relayed the information to Anna later that night, Anna's eyes went wide. She turned to her laptop and began typing furiously. Ricardo Rivas. Anna breathed, pulling up a series of articles. He's Alejandro's biggest rival. They've been locked in a brutal corporate war for the last 2 years over a new cellular technology patent. Rivas has a reputation for playing dirty. Very dirty. The pieces of the puzzle began to click into place, forming a picture far more sinister than Isabella could have imagined. This wasn't just about Sofia Reyes. She was likely a pawn, a beautiful, willing distraction. The real mastermind was Ricardo Rivas. He hadn't just wanted to wound Alejandro in the boardroom. He had orchestrated a strike against him that was deeply, horrifically personal. He had aimed to invalidate Alejandro's legacy, to poison the root of his dynasty, by making him deny his own son. But what about Sofia? Isabella asked. She was there. She was the one who pushed for the test. And who do you think put the idea in her head? Anna countered. Rivas is smart. He wouldn't get his own hands dirty. He would find someone close to Alejandro, someone with their own motives, and use them. Sofia wanted you gone. Rivas wanted Alejandro broken. They had a common enemy. Suddenly, Anna stopped. She was staring at a photo from a society gala taken 6 months prior. In the background, almost lost in the crowd, stood Sophia Reyes. She was in an animated conversation with a silver-haired, imposing man. Ana zoomed in. The man was Ricardo Rivas. It was all the proof they needed to take the next step. They had the driver's confession. They had the motive. They had the connection between the conspirators. They now had the ammunition to go back to Alejandro, not as a spurned wife with a wild theory, but with cold, hard facts. They had a glimmer of hope, and it was blindingly bright. Armed with Javier's confession and the damning connection between Sofia and Ricardo Rivas, Isabella knew she couldn't just walk up to Alejandro. He was walled off, cocooned in his anger, and manipulated by the very people who had orchestrated his pain. She needed a battering ram, and that meant finding a lawyer who was fearless enough to take on a titan like Alejandro Morales. Ana, through her network, found the perfect person. A sharp, formidable attorney named Elena Vargas, a woman known for taking on impossible cases and winning. Elena listened to Isabella's story in her sleek, minimalist office, her expression unreadable. She examined Anna's research, Javier's secretly recorded confession, and the photograph of Sofia with Rivas. When Isabella was finished, Elena leaned back in her chair, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. "This is beautiful," Elena said the words, sending a shiver down Isabella's spine. "It's a symphony of corporate espionage and personal betrayal. They didn't just break the law. They were arrogant about it." Elena's strategy was aggressive. She didn't file a quiet motion. She fired a cannonball. She filed an emergency petition with the family court alleging fraud, conspiracy, and emotional distress. Crucially, she demanded an immediate court-ordered and supervised second DNA test. She attached Javier's affidavit and the evidence linking Sofia to Rivas. She served the papers not just to Alejandro's legal team, but to Alejandro himself. The effect was explosive. Alejandro, who had been trying to bury his pain in work and the empty companionship of Sofia, was blindsided. His lawyers had assured him Isabella would fade away. Instead, she had returned with an army. His first reaction was rage. He called Elena roaring about defamation and harassment. "Mr. Morales." Elena's voice was like ice over the phone. "Your anger is noted. However, we have a sworn affidavit from the courier who switched the samples on the night your son was born. He did so on the instruction of a man who stated that Rivas will be pleased. We also have evidence placing your current companion, Miss Sofia Reyes, in private conversation with your chief business rival, Ricardo Rivas. If you wish to contest this in open court and have this drama play out on the front page of every newspaper, be my guest. Or you can consent to a simple supervised blood test. The choice is yours." Faced with the undeniable evidence and the threat of a public spectacle that would destroy his company's reputation, Alejandro was cornered. He agreed to the test. The second test was a world away from the first. It took place in a neutral medical facility overseen by a court-appointed supervisor. Elena Vargas was there, a stoic guardian. Alejandro was there, his face pale and grim. Isabella was there, holding Mateo, her heart, a tangled mess of hope and fear. Sofia was notably absent, having been ordered by Alejandro's frantic lawyers to make herself scarce. The blood draw was quick. The wait for the results was agonizing. They all gathered 2 days later in Elena Vargas's conference room. The air was thick enough to cut with a knife. A court official arrived with a sealed envelope. He opened it and read the single-page report aloud. His voice was flat and official. Based on the analysis of the DNA samples provided, the alleged father, Alejandro Morales, is not excluded as the biological father of the child, Mateo Morales. The probability of paternity is 99.9999%. Silence. The words echoed in the sterile room. 19.9999%. Isabella let out a shuddering sob, burying her face in Mateo's soft blanket. Vindicated. Her son was vindicated. Alejandro stared at the report as if it were written in a foreign language. The color drained from his face, replaced by a ghastly, mottled gray. The entire foundation of his rage, his cruelty, his life for the past month had been a lie. A lie he had not only believed, but had championed. He looked at Isabella, truly looked at her for the first time since that horrific night in the hospital. He saw the profound pain in her eyes, the exhaustion, the resilience. And he saw the love she held for the son he had disowned. The weight of his actions crashed down on him with the force of a physical blow. He staggered back a step, his hand going to his chest as if he couldn't breathe. Isabella. He choked out his voice, a raw, broken thing. My God, what have I done? The unmasking was complete. But the truth was a double-edged sword. It had cleared Isabella's name, but it had also unleashed a new kind of chaos. The betrayal was not hers, but his, and the man who had been the architect of it all, Ricardo Rivas, was still out there, while the woman who had acted as his willing accomplice, Sofia Reyes, was about to face a reckoning of her own. Alejandro had his son back, but he had lost his wife, and the journey to even begin to atone for that was a mountain far higher than any he had ever climbed in the world of business. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Armed with the court-verified DNA results and Javier's testimony, Elena Vargas didn't just win. She went on the offensive. She strategically leaked key parts of the story to Ana, who crafted a stunning, explosive piece of investigative journalism that laid the entire conspiracy bare. The story of the corporate titan, the spurned wife, the scheming actress, and the rival who weaponized a baby's paternity became an international sensation. Ricardo Rivas's reputation was shattered. His company's stock plummeted as investors fled from the taint of his dishonorable tactics. He was engulfed in a firestorm of lawsuits and investigations. Sofia Reyes's career evaporated overnight. The endorsement deals vanished. The film roles were rescinded. Branded as a malicious homewrecker and a co-conspirator in a cruel plot against a mother and her newborn, she became a pariah. The public that had once adored her now reviled her. She disappeared from the limelight, her ambition turning to ash in her mouth. But for Isabella, the public victory was a hollow echo compared to the private war still raging in her heart. Alejandro was a man undone. The revelation had not just exposed his gullibility. It had forced him to look at a part of himself he never knew existed. A cruel, vengeful, and weak man, easily manipulated by pride and a beautiful face. He was consumed by a guilt so profound it was a physical illness. He fired his entire legal team. He came to Anna's apartment, not as a millionaire, but as a penitent. He stood at the door, drenched from the rain, his eyes red-rimmed and pleading. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Isabella," he said, his voice raw. "There are no words to excuse what I did. I was a fool, a monster. I let them poison my mind against you, the purest thing in my life. I betrayed you. I betrayed our son." He had transferred the Madrid mansion into her name. He had set up a trust fund for Matteo so vast that it would ensure his future 100 times over. He offered to finance Anna's dream of starting her own independent news agency. He offered Isabella anything she wanted the world if she would just take it. But Isabella was no longer the woman who had lived in the gilded cage. The fire of the past month had burned away her naivete, reforging her into someone stronger, someone who understood that her worth was not tied to a man, a mansion, or a name. She let him see Matteo. She watched as he held his son for the first time with the full, undisputed knowledge that this was his flesh and blood. She saw the tears stream down his face, the profound, gut-wrenching regret in his eyes. A part of her, the part that still loved the man he once was, ached for him. But love was no longer enough. Trust once shattered so completely could not simply be glued back together. Weeks turned into months. Alejandro was relentless in his pursuit of redemption. He attended therapy. He made public apologies. He dedicated his time and resources to charities for single mothers. He sent her letters not of excuse, but of self-reflection, taking full accountability for his every failure. He didn't ask her to come back. He simply asked for the chance to prove he could be the father Matteo deserved, and perhaps one day, a man she could respect again. The story ends not with a kiss, but with a choice. We see Isabella months later, sitting in the sun-drenched garden of the Madrid mansion. Her mansion. She is radiant, confident, a queen on her own throne. Matteo is laughing in his playpen on the grass. Her phone buzzes. It's a message from Alejandro. He is in the city and would like to see Matteo. He makes no demands on her time, simply offering to be a father. Isabella looks at her son, at the beautiful life she has secured for them both. She has been vindicated. She has found her power. The story is no longer about his betrayal, but about her resilience. Whether she will ever let Alejandro back into her heart remains an unanswered question. But for the first time, the choice is entirely hers. She is not a victim of a millionaire's drama, but the architect of her own new life, built from the ashes stronger and more beautiful than before. The journey of Isabella is a testament to the incredible strength of a mother's love and the resilience of the human spirit. From the depths of unimaginable betrayal to the triumphant reclaiming of her truth, her story reminds us that even when our worlds are set on fire, we can rise from the ashes. But what do you think? Was Alejandro's remorse genuine? Can a trust so completely shattered ever be rebuilt? Or are some betrayals truly unforgivable? We want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of drama, resilience, and ultimate justice moved you, please give this video a like and share it with others who love a story where the truth prevails. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next compelling narrative. Thank you for listening.